Campaigners will find out later this morning if their case against the named person scheme has been successful. It's at the Supreme Court and challenges the Scottish Government's legislation, which will entitle every child under 18 to a named person. The law is due to come into force at the end of August. Major children's charities, including Barnardo's, Action for Children and Children First, have accused opponents of the scheme of making inaccurate and unjustified statements about the named person. Ministers insist the scheme will help children receive appropriate support if and when they need it. Well, we're joined by Simon Calvert, who's a spokesperson for the No to Named Person scheme. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Why would you oppose something that aims to keep children out of harm's way?
Because it won't work. Because that's not what it will do. It will congest the child protection system by generating lots of false flags and information about families where things are going just fine. Social workers and child protection experts are under enough pressure without having their desks overloaded with files sent up to them via the named person scheme.
But what about those families where,
family.
What about those families where things aren't going just fine, where a child is in harm's way?
The files on those families are more likely to get lost in the system if you have lots of data on families where things are going fine. Because the named person scheme operates at the level not of risk of harm to a child, not of even of welfare, which was the word used in your introduction. It operates at the level of well-being, which the government says means happiness. So the named person is a statutorily appointed, compulsory monitor of children's well-being for every child in Scotland. That's an impossible task. They have legal powers to obtain and share data on not just children, but on their families also. And again, that operates at the level of well-being. So what this is going to do, it's going to weigh down the child protection system. It is going to stretch the already overstretched safety net to breaking point. And in the process, it's going to invade the privacy of families who are doing a perfectly good job.
Well, let's just pick up on a couple of the points you've made there. Firstly, on it being compulsory, the Scottish Government say this is an entitlement, and Nicola Sturgeon has told us in the past that parents won't be forced to accept it.
Well, I believe that she believes that, but it's not true.
She's the one introducing the legislation. Surely she knows exactly how it'll work.
Well, you would think so, but I've read the law too. She's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, and lots of people have read the law. Lots of parents have read the law, and they know that the word consent never appears. It does not rest on consent. It does not use the word entitlement. It simply appoints a named person for every single child in Scotland, whether you want one or not.
Aren't you in danger of misunderstanding exactly how this will work? You talk about the system being gummed up. You talk about files on all of these different cases. Isn't the reality that actually this named person, who may well be a senior teacher, will provide advice, information or support where appropriate, where asked?
And you know what? Good teachers, good health visitors, they're already doing that. And so let's not take any credit away from them. But the named person legislation distorts their roles. And that's why teachers themselves have voted to express their scepticism about the scheme. Their unions have said that teachers cannot be expected to take on the named person responsibilities outside working hours. And so councils across Scotland are scrambling to find nameless officials in offices across the land who will be able to allegedly take on the responsibilities of named persons during school holidays. Health visitors, surveyed by their own union Unison, said they did not think the scheme was a good idea at this time. They complained bitterly about the damage that the named person responsibilities will do to their relationships with the families that they care for.
And if it is as calamitous as you say, why are Barnardo's, Action for Children and Children First backing this scheme and accusing you and others of making inaccurate and unjustified statements?
Well, you have to ask them yourself, but I mean, they've been involved in the development of this scheme. They're obviously invested in it. They are, I mean...
And they're the ones that pick up the pieces when things go wrong, and we've seen child welfare go disastrously wrong in Scotland very recently.
And so they've made a terrible mistake. And let's be honest, you know, these groups are the groups that will get referrals from the named person scheme. These are groups that are quite heavily reliant on funding from the Scottish Government. They have a job to do to convince the public that they are independent of the government when they keep coming out in support of this government policy.
But they're also people who would be the first to say if they felt they were being overwhelmed, surely.
Well, listen,
and you're suggesting they will be. They don't believe that.
And do you know what? They're not the only children's groups. There are other children's groups that take a different view, and we've heard from them in the public square as well. And there are social workers who take a different view. There are lots of people who are doing exactly the same job day in, day out, and they take a different view from them. I guess that's just life. And at the end of the day, it remains to be, proved who's right or wrong. But we're absolutely convinced that this is a mistaken, counterproductive, intrusive policy. The government should scrap it. If you really want to help child protection, the government could take even just a fraction of the money, the tens of millions that's been spent on rolling out the named person, and they could just invest it directly in social services. And I think a lot of people think that would do a lot more good.
Your campaign group has launched previous legal actions which have failed. How optimistic are you that this ruling from the Supreme Court will go in your favour?
Well, I mean, I sat through the hearing in March, and we were very satisfied indeed that our lawyer, Aidan O'Neill, QC, put across the case for us very well. I'm a lawyer myself. I've watched benches for 20 years, judges for 20 years, and you cannot read them. So we'll just have to wait and see what they say later this morning.
If the case goes against you, is that the end of the matter?
Well, we'd have to see the content of the judgment. We'd have to take advice from lawyers on whether there were any options for appeal. And I tell you this, the level of public concern about the named person scheme means that whatever happens, the campaign will have to go on because parents will demand it, because they're very, very concerned about the damage that this scheme is going to do to family privacy. And lots of people are very concerned about the damage it's going to do to the child protection system and to important relationships between professionals and the children in their care. Don't forget that the children's legal group Child Clan Law intervened in this legal action precisely on the basis that it felt that young people would be put off from accessing services, put off from telling their stories to professionals because they would know that the named person law entitles their data, their confidential conversations to be shared around much more widely. That's a very serious concern.
Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us this morning. Simon Calvert, who is a spokesperson for the No to Named Person scheme.